plummeted 60% since they resumed trading earlier this month following a 2-month suspension. Jamie Metzl, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, joins us now. Thanks for coming on the show. So walk us through this. What were ZTE shareholders hoping what would come out of this meeting?
Well, there was a deal before 2.5 weeks ago that ZTE would pay this $1 billion fine and put $400 million into escrow. And the idea was that that would enable them to resume business as usual. But now there's a lot of concern that the U.S. Congress is reimposing these kinds of bans. When trading began reopened on ZTE in Hong Kong and Shenzhen, the stock fell about 42%. And so there's a lot of tumult and there's a lot of fear. And right now, the question for ZTE is what's going to happen. And their fate is in many ways not in their own hands. And that's a very difficult position for them.
Which way do you think the U.S. Commerce Department will go?
Well, that's the problem. The U.S. Commerce Department wants to follow the lead of the president, but Congress is pushing very aggressively for a much tougher stance. And so at the end of the day, it's probably going to be impossible for the Commerce Department to trump Congress, just because the feeling of standing up to ZTE, as symbolic as it is, because the challenge to the United States from China's aggressive and mercantilist tech policy is much greater than ZTE. But Congress is pretty uniform, Democrats and Republicans alike, in standing up to ZTE. So Commerce is going to have its hands tied.
So we are seeing shares down for ZTE 60%. What do you think? Is there really a way back for ZTE?
It's going to be very difficult. And in China, what they are recognizing now is, and they're starting to feel now, is that their dependence on U.S. components, and whether it's Qualcomm chips or Google Android operating systems, is too great and creates too big of a vulnerability. So in many ways, this has been a Sputnik moment for China, where they are recognizing that they need to bring more and more of the functions more into in-house or in-country in China. And so in the near term, this is a real challenge for companies like ZTE. In the longer term, even in the medium term, excuse me, China is going to look to build even more of its own ecosystem. And that's great when it's just inside of China. But when that ecosystem goes abroad and we see companies like ZTE and Huawei and Xiaomi competing with the U.S. tech giants all around the world, that's going to be an opportunity for China and a challenge for the United States.
Now we are hearing that China's relaxing its foreign investment restrictions, opening up parts of its economy to foreign investment, whether it be railways, shipping, power grids. Is this sort of an olive branch to the U.S.? Is this going to cool trade tensions with the U.S.?
It's a little bit of an olive branch because they know there are much tougher policies heading down the pike in the United States. It's a little bit of a statement of necessity by the Chinese because there are strategic sectors where they know they need more foreign expertise and capital. And it's a little bit of global positioning. The United States, for so many decades, has been the champion of free trade, of an open international trading system. And now the United States is picking fights with its own allies. President Trump is musing about potentially pulling out of the WTO. China is a very protectionist and very mercantilist economy, but they recognize that with some relatively small steps, they can position themselves as champions of a free and open international trade system. And if they do that, it's going to make it very difficult for countries like the United States, for groupings of countries like the EU, to effectively stand up against China. And that's the real tragedy of this moment, is that the open free trade system has benefited everybody, particularly the United States and the European Union. But by fighting against this system that we have created and that has benefited us, President Trump is creating incredible opportunities for the Chinese.
All right, Jamie Metzl, thanks so much for your analysis.
My pleasure.